you can see, I'm not in my studio today, and there is a beautiful night scenery behind me of downtown Los Angeles. This means we are going to talk about night photography today. And I know what a lot of you might be thinking, that night photography is very complicated and you can't get those good night pictures. Your pictures are either dark or they are blurry. But there is a way of taking good pictures during the night, and it's not that difficult as you might think. Of course, there is a lot of more challenges during the night than the day because of lack of light. But you can overcome those challenges if you know what you are doing. So during the night photography, the main challenge is that there is not enough light. So let's think, how can we add more light to the picture? There is a few different ways to add light to the picture. And one of them is to use wide aperture opening. So if your aperture is open wide, it means more light can get into the camera. Or you can use slower shutter speed. Your shutter is open longer, means more light again. Also, you can use higher ISO, which means more light sensitivity on the sensor. You can also use the additional lights, like for example, you can use flash. Let's talk about those things in more detail. First, we are going to talk about wide aperture opening, which is actually a smaller f number. And we are going to talk about fast lenses. You probably heard a few times already about fast lenses, but what are the fast lenses? The lenses with wider maximum aperture opening called fast lenses, and the wider the maximum aperture opening is, the faster is the lens. And this is because with wider aperture opening, you will be able to use a faster shutter speed. Since wider aperture opening will let more light into the camera in the shorter period of time. Usually you can find faster prime lenses, the lens which doesn't change its focal length. So for example, like this Nikon 50mm, which aperture can open till f1.4, which is very wide aperture opening. But you still can find the faster zoom lenses, for example the 17 to 55mm, which aperture can open till 2.8, which is still considered a pretty wide aperture opening. But usually the fast zoom lenses are much more expensive than primes. Let's take a look what are disadvantages and advantages of using wide aperture. As you probably know from my previous lesson, the wider the aperture, the more shallow is depth of field, so it means the less of the image will appear in focus. So it might not be ideal for landscape photography when you, for example, want everything in focus. And it can work better for portraits and other situations where shallow depth of field is desired. But the advantages of wide aperture is that wide aperture might let you to use a smaller ISO, which means less noise, or a faster shutter speed, which can help you to freeze the movement or avoid camera shake if you need to hold your camera. Now let's talk about using a slower shutter speed. The disadvantage of using a slower shutter speed is that when you, for example, take a picture of moving subjects, you can get a motion blur. Or if you hold your camera, you can get a camera shake. And when you're shooting with slower shutter speed, tripod or something to support your camera will be needed. And this is how camera shake can look during the night. And it's not always a bad thing because you can create some interesting effects by shaking the camera while taking a picture. But the advantage of using slower shutter speed is that it will let you to use smaller ISO, which is less noise, or smaller aperture opening, which means more depth of field, more of the scene appears in focus. We can also use a higher ISO while shooting at night. And as you know, the higher ISO, the more noise you get. But if you watch my video about ISO, you can see that modern cameras, the newer cameras, perform much better with a higher ISO than older ones. The advantage of higher ISO is that it will let you to use a faster shutter speed if you need to hold the camera or freeze the moving subject when needed, and smaller aperture if more depth of field is needed. We can also use the flash during the night, but the problem with flash is that sometimes flash is not allowed, like for example during performance it might not be allowed, or for wedding photographers, sometimes when they're shooting a wedding couple in church, very often flashes are not allowed in church. Also, flash can make our image look flat and not a true representation of the scene because it's overpowering the natural light coming maybe from some different light sources. But if you know how to use flash correctly, it can be very helpful. But in this video, we're not going to talk about flash, and I will make a separate video only about flash. This video would be about wider aperture, slower shutter speed, and higher ISO, in which situation is better to use which. As you know, they are all connected and you need to find a proper balance, and you need to know which one is better to use in which situation. Now I'm going to show you how to take a long exposure of the night scenery. And you will take the long exposure, of course, by using the slow shutter speed. This technique is perfect for night landscape. And for this, you will need something to put your camera on, because if you hold your camera in your hands, you easily can get a camera shake because you will use a slow shutter speed, so your shutter will be open long and it will pick up any movement of the camera. So the tripod is the best for this situation, but of course a lot of times I was in situation when I didn't have my tripod and there was a beautiful night scenery in front of me. So I had to get creative and find something to put my camera on, but tripod is the best option. Also, what you might need for a long exposure is a cable release. The cable release helps you to make your exposure without touching your camera. Instead of pressing the button on your camera, you will press the button on the cable release like this. This will help you to avoid a camera shake because you don't touch your camera at the exposure moment. And also, when you're buying your cable release, give the salesperson the model of your camera, because even for different Nikon cameras there are different cable releases. But if you don't have the cable release, you can also use the timer on your camera. And let me show you where the timer is in my camera. But for different cameras, the timer might be in different place. So the timer in my camera is right here. You just press this button and then you roll it to this. The sign means timer. It's pretty much on all cameras this sign means the timer. So when you have a timer, when you press the shutter button, the camera will automatically shoot the pictures in 5 seconds, for example. So this way you don't have to touch the camera when the exposure goes on and off. And how do you actually get that perfect exposure? First of all, set your ISO. And I recommend for long exposure, set ISO to 100, which will give you the least noise. But also the long exposure, the very slow shutter speed might add a little bit noise. So we don't want to add even more noise with higher ISO. So set ISO to 100 or as low as your camera can go. Then remember there is a meter inside the camera and we're using a manual mode. And you watch the meter inside the camera. Set your aperture first. Usually for night scenes, I set my aperture somewhere in between f11 and f16, so I get a good depth of field. So
more of my scene is in focus. And then I'm watching my meter when I'm setting my shutter speed. And when my meter is in the middle, that's where I leave my shutter speed. And my camera goes to 30 seconds. And then if you want to do more than 30 seconds of exposure, you will use bulb function. My camera, as you can see, I will show you, can go to 30 seconds. Here we have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. And after 30, it comes bulb. And bulb means that the shutter is open as long as you press the shutter button. And in this situation, the cable release can come very handy. On the cable release, you can just press this button and then you move it up, and then your shutter is open in this situation, and then you press it back and then you release your shutter. The only thing is you need to time it how long your shutter is open. You can have a timer on your cell phone, or also they sell the cable releases which have timers in them, which can be very handy. But I would like to warn you that your meter in this situation might often not be 100% accurate. But advantage with a digital camera that you can look on the back of your camera and see if you're satisfied with your picture. If you feel like your picture is too bright, reduce your shutter speed. If your picture is too dark, make your exposure longer. It's always good to bracket back and forth a few pictures, so when you look at your picture in computer, you can see which picture you like more, darker or lighter picture. Also, remember we were talking about white balance. And when you're taking pictures at night, there is so many different light sources in a different situation, which can give you a different color cast. So it might be also fun to try and shoot in a different white balances. You can use tungsten white balance or incandescent white balance or day white balance, and see how your picture would look with the different white balances. And you might find that some pictures might look better than others, and you can get some interesting effects.
And here is the picture I just took of the freeway behind me. And I used shutter speed of 30 seconds. And my aperture was f11 and ISO of course 100. And I love to take pictures of the freeways or some roads with a lot of cars at night, because when you use a slow shutter speed you get this interesting effect from the car headlights. Let me show you a couple more pictures of the night photography, of the night landscape photography. This picture was taken in San Francisco. I was using a tripod, which led me to use shutter speed of 25 seconds. My aperture was f9 and my ISO was 100 for least noise I can get. This picture was taken in the hotel in Hawaii. And I actually didn't have my tripod with me, which I regretted so much, but what could I do? I just found something to put my camera on. I think I used like a towel basket or something, and I put my camera on the towel basket because I didn't want to miss the picture because I didn't have a tripod. And I used exposure of 30 seconds here, and aperture was f11 and of course 100 ISO. And as you can see, the palm trees were waving on the wind and they were moving. So with shutter speed of 30 seconds, you can see the movement from the palm trees, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think it adds some interest and some motion to the picture. This picture is from Hawaii as well. And this is actually a picture of the ocean, but because of this different kind of lighting, like the house was lit in blue light and the rest was lit in yellow light, it created this kind of like mysterious look. And because of the slow shutter speed, it's kind of made the water look kind of like a mist or dust, which I actually really like. And another picture from San Francisco, and I don't know if you can recognize this, is the famous Lombard Street, the curviest street in the world, which is located in San Francisco. And for me, night photography doesn't mean only outdoor photography. You can also get some really nice pictures indoors. Like this one, for example. This one was taken in the lobby of Hilton Resort. And usually indoors you can get more natural light coming from the lamps. And in this situation, I used shutter speed of just 6 seconds, which compared to my outdoor shots where I used exposure of 25 or even 30 seconds, this one was just 6. And here a totally different situation. This is a candy store in San Francisco. And I didn't have my tripod with me, and I probably would be able even to set my tripod in the middle of the store. So in this situation, I had to hold the camera. That's why I used ISO of 1000, which gave me a faster shutter speed. And I used shutter speed of 1/15 of the second. And because I used a wide angle lens, I think it was like 20mm lens, I was still able to hold the camera without shaking. And I'm pretty good with that. It also depends on you how steady you can hold the camera. And as you can see, I was using shutter speed of 1/15 of the second, but picture is still sharp. And I used f6.3, and you see that the edge of the picture is a little bit out of focus because of the wider aperture, but it doesn't really bother me. I think this picture came out very nice anyways.